In my world there is music and good vibes and laughter and lovers, adventure and friendship. We know who we are.
Welcome to Be the Wellness Podcast, where we help you master your body, mind, and the experience of life through insightful conversation, interviews with experts and thought leaders, all with a side of marital banter and some good old-fashioned humor.
Yes, we are your hosts, Adam and Vanessa Lambert, and we're committed to helping you live life fully expressed physically, mentally, and experientially. Sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation.
Boom, boom, boom. 200.
Here we go. Incoming.
Incoming?
Incoming. Hello, you beautiful beings. See what I did there?
Did you stutter?
We are so excited to be here with you on our 200th episode.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
Deal.
It seems like just yesterday that we did 100.
Yes.
When we had the Sisson on and talked about his whole life story, which was cool.
Super cool.
It was super cool.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. On one hand, it feels like yesterday. On the other hand, I'm like, I can barely remember it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's that weird duality of like, it was either yesterday or
it didn't happen.
Or it never happened.
Well, some of it is that, it was 100 episodes ago,
Yeah.
right? So there's just a lot of that. But then, like, frankly, we're on like day 45 of Groundhog Day or whatever, right? Because
more than that, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is the thing. I don't know. Well, all of April and half of March.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, everything's starting to run together.
Yes.
The time being a construct is like really starting to become apparent. Like
It's
once
true.
once you get outside of the kind of normal rhythms of life, it all just starts to get weird. It starts to get super weird.
Warbly.
Yeah. Well, that's what I think about, like prisoners of war, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, or people that are, because I think if you're in like jail,
Mm-hmm.
like regular jail, there's enough of like a thing going on, and
There's
you've
schedule.
and you have like, I don't know, appointments with your lawyer or whatever.
Probably,
there's like things that are going on, right?
Yeah.
But if you're like in a POW camp somewhere,
Well,
you just,
yeah.
you don't even know, like you have no idea what's going on.
Well, isn't this what they say about being a prisoner of war if it ever happens to you? Couple words of wisdom. They say to like keep some kind of schedule as well as you can. Like get up in the morning and like try to do push-ups or like
brush your teeth,
or like whatever you're allowed to do, but try to keep some kind of schedule because it helps you from losing it.
Just from losing your marbles.
Yeah.
But like even with that, so like that helps with your daily schedule, I think.
Right.
But like I wonder, how long it takes before you just completely lose track of like days.
For me, about
a week.
3. 3 days or so, and I'm pretty much like, I have no idea.
I have no idea what's going on. Yeah.
That's my favorite line. What day is it?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. But, this is really exciting because we were thinking about what we wanted to do for our 200th episode, and we batted back, should we have a different guest? And, Adam mentioned we had Mark Sisson on last time, which was really sweet and personal to us because Mark is such a dear friend and mentor, and really we owe so much to him for, kind of giving us our start and kicking us off into this world. So that was really appropriate and special. But when we thought about our 200th episode, we really thought that what we wanted to do most was just be with you guys and kind of reflect on the journey and kind of just talk about some of the things that really stand true for us at this point and some things that maybe we've changed our mind on, and just kind of share with you like what we've learned so far in 200 episodes.
Yeah. What we have learned in 200 episodes. And so to provide some structure for this conversation so that it's not just another ramblecast, we are going to talk about it from the perspective of body, mind, and experience.
Right.
Right. So, so we'll do that.
Sort of the 3 categories. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for people who are new listeners, the reason that it's broken in that way is that's really what we kind of encompass and really think of ourselves as, experts in or what have you is really body, mind, and the experience of life. And we're always looking for ways to optimize, people's experience of their physical reality, their emotional, mental reality, and how that expresses itself and how that, creates a life that's fully expressed. And so that's why we're approaching it that way, is to really kind of, button it all up into what the things that we have found are important in those three categories.
Yeah. For now.
And then we might change our minds.
Well, I think we definitely will, or we should hope that we do. Right.
Yes,
and that's one of the things that I think, both of us could drop a pin on as part of the experience that we've had of doing this, because it's one thing to be a fitness or nutrition or even, mindfulness or spirituality sort of enthusiast, you know what I mean? Where you are just doing it on your own. There's a real tendency in that world to just kind of, you don't really know where you started and where you've come to, right? Because it's all your own internal experience. But when you start doing it with other people or for other people or helping people, coaching people, you have clients that you coached 4 years ago that are like, hey, I want to jump back in and work with you. And you are a completely different person and recommend completely different things, right? So in their mind, they're like, oh yeah, that thing that I did with them was awesome. I want to go back and do that.
Right.
And then we're like,
well, we've changed.
Yeah, we don't really
do
that anymore, and here's why, right? So there's this when it's part of your gig, I think it's easier to tell what all has changed. And, when you can look back and look at how much has changed, you can just imagine what's going to change moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let's kick it off with body.
Yeah.
Start right there in the physicalness.
In the physicality. You want to go first?
Yeah. I think for me, one of the things that I find to be just really, really true is, especially now in so many years of coaching. And for those of you who are new or maybe just haven't heard my story in a while, I've been coaching for a really long time. When I was 9 years old, I think around 9 years old, I started coaching the younger kids in gymnastics. And so I have I've taught swim lessons, I've taught gymnastics, I've taught all different modalities throughout my life.
Step aerobics. Yep.
Kind of jigged and jogged through all these different things that were really just passions of mine that, I ended up having some bit of mastery over to help others. And that's really, what this whole process has been for me. And the thing that really resonates and rings true for me is just how resilient our human bodies are, how resilient this meat vehicle is. And, watching people who maybe are not super confident in their physicality and haven't really had maybe the education that they'd like to have, or that, would be beneficial for them to feel more confident in their bodies. Maybe they're really starting from ground zero. And it's really amazing to watch that with just, a moderate amount of effort and a lot of consistency, the great, incredible changes that can happen to your physical being. And I'm not just talking about weight loss, even though that can definitely be a byproduct, or it can be something that you're seeking out to accomplish. But I'm talking about real changes to the environment of your body and the way that it affects who you are in the world. And, that has such far-reaching implications when you're really able to fundamentally shift your physical being into a new state. And so to me, one of the biggest things I think that I have garnered over these years, and especially over the last 200 podcasts where we've really been diving into this, is just how resilient our physical beings are.
To some degree, you don't need to worry about getting it right the first time, because you're not going to die.
Yeah. And, just remembering that it's okay that if you try something and you decide it's not for you, or it didn't quite resonate with you the way you wanted it to, because you're worried that if you don't do that thing that way, you're not going to be able to be a physical being, or you're not going to be able to be fit, or you're not going to be able to change something that you fundamentally want to change about yourself. That if you just can find, a relationship with your food, a relationship with movement that is moving the ball forward, that it's amazing how the body will adapt and change.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if you stick with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, just kind of dovetail into it. Well, so is that's nutrition and strength and conditioning wrapped in one
I don't know.
for you?
It's just
Yeah,
something.
that's fine.
It's
That's
just
cool.
what I said. It's just what
And
came
you
out
meant
of
it.
my mouth.
Yeah, so I think, probably the number one thing that I've kind of softened on, and what I mean by softened is like when I first started doing this, there was, well, when I very first started paying attention to strength and conditioning stuff, like in, I don't know, 1998 or whatever, right? When I first started having to train people for work, I was super new to it all. So I was just reading everything that I could find. And I didn't have like a particular camp that I was in, right? It was like I found stuff that resonated with me and I was like, oh man, this stuff seems like it's really good. You try it for a while and it works or it doesn't work. It was just very much kind of N equals oneing my way through all of this stuff, but also, coaching as I went, right? So it's like that whole thing we always say is like, you don't have to be the best at it. You just need to be a little bit better than the people that you're coaching, right? Because you're just, leveling up.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have like this super rigid black and whiteness about the fitness or the nutrition stuff. It was just like I was kind of, swimming in the muck, so to speak, with all of that. And it wasn't until Rob Wolf and CrossFit that I really got kind of like, no, I think this is the way to do this. And I rode that line for quite a while with quite a bit of success, and I think to some degree, like, having a period of time where you almost like have an idealistic point of view about some particular methodology is helpful because you really just dive into it, But what I would say now is that I'm back to the gray, where before it was like, nope, it's high intensity strength training with some gymnastics component and a paleo diet and, just enough carbohydrate to survive for everyone, and now it's like not that way, I mean, and just from my own experience and with my own personal body and journey through all of this stuff and having trained thousands of people now at this point, you see, elite performers on all ends of the spectrum and people who get crushed for no reason when you tweak something that didn't need to be tweaked. Right. So I think for me, like this whole spectrum has gone from being super rigid and, kind of, idealistic about it to, much more individual and personal and really trying to help people understand what the minimum effective dose is, and especially when it comes to the strength and conditioning component, it's kind of funny because like, you hear all of this stuff like abs are made in the kitchen and 85% of sport and body composition is diet and all of this kind of stuff, right? So everybody thinks that like this nutrition component is the absolute, most important aspect of it all. And like, again, that just kind of really comes down to your goals. But like, I used to say that all the time too. It's like, you can do whatever for your exercise, you really just need to nail the nutrition part. And now it's like the very first question that has to be asked is like, where are you now? And where are you trying to go? Because it can be a completely different story. It's like, so you come to me with reasonable body composition. It's not like your body composition isn't impacting your performance. You know what I mean? You're not like sweating, tying your shoes and stuff like that. Right. And you're like, I want to improve my athletic performance and maybe lean out a little bit. And if it's like everything's black and white, you hear, okay, lean out. All right, well, then we need to really nail this nutrition piece, right? And we're really going to focus on this aspect of it. Where if you were like, well, I don't really care, how, like what my body composition is, I just need to get, whatever this athletic performance goal is, then like the initial trigger is, oh, well, we've got to go straight into the weight room and see what happens here. And like, those are the kind of like black and white priorities because it's really hard to do both things at once is kind of what everybody tells you, right? It's hard to, what everyone wants is to put on muscle and lose body fat at the same time. And everyone will tell you that it's very difficult to do at the same time. And it is, but where the nuance and where the kind of grayness in all of this comes in is learning more about the individual and how they work best. It's like, it's so much more like in the precision nutrition world, they call it client-centric coaching, right? So it's not about what I want as the coach. It's about what you can do, right? Like, and my job as the coach is to understand all of the variables, and the ones that you can do, we're going to utilize to shift you in the direction that you want to go, And it probably sounds like, if somebody's never been a coach, probably sounds like, well, shit, what were you doing before? You know what I mean? Because that sounds like exactly how it should go. But the reality of it is, I think for a lot of folks, it's not that way. It starts very much with coming from a training pedigree or background of how you do things, and there's inputs that fit, and you pick a path based on those inputs. And over time, that switches to this much more open thing of, I don't know how else to say it other than what you can actually do, can and will do, is like the most important piece. And that ties in kind of what you were saying of like, what can you do consistently? Because that's what's going to drive the entire car,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a whole lot of gray. We always joke about this, that like the longer we do this, the less we know.
Yeah.
It's like, because, you really do, you see so many scenarios and so many different clients and so many different realities for people that like your black and whiteness just starts to fade, because you're like, this rigidity it's not applicable like in this world of actually really trying to help people, if that makes sense, and it's like, in the end, there's going to be a certain, a certain amount of people who really gravitate towards that rigidity and that strictness, and who can manage it and who thrive in it. And if they do, you can show up that way for them. That's fine. Like, you're like, great, we know that we could do that. But what's been, I think more interesting and more challenging is to really grow into, how do we really, really help people?
Yeah.
Like, in the end, what's the thing that's really going to make the difference on moving the needle?
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing that seems to make the difference, like at the 30,000 foot view, the thing that always makes the difference is progress, measurable progress that's happening all the time. And I think, I think that's one of the things that is certainly, it's in my sort of purview, and in my, I don't know, purview is not the right word. It's on my radar or whatever, as a thing to integrate more into our programming somehow, is these bi-weekly performance checks, so that you can see that you're progressing, because there's just nothing like progress to fuel motivation.
Yeah.
And there's so many ways to get it.
Yeah, I think that's why weight loss actually, ironically, sometimes isn't even about just weight loss. It's about like having a goal and having something measurable to look and say, oh yeah, I can step on the scale. Right. And it's different, because it is hard to tell day in and day out. Is anything changing? Like, I can't really tell. So it gives you some kind of measurable, some kind of metric. And it's like, when you're not focused on weight loss, or maybe that isn't your metric, then what? Like, what? You've got to create some metrics for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's actually something that I've come all the way back around to too. I was at one point a no scale guy. Like, no, don't do that. Just do this and this. And to some degree, it's an artifact of coaching almost completely remotely now, where before I was still coaching quite a few people in person. Right. And when you're seeing people on a day-to-day, you can get a feel for what's going on. Yeah. But when you're not, you need something, you know, and I'm full tilt on the scale. I mean, if it makes people crazy, we'll come up with something else. But if it doesn't, even if you're trying to improve athletic performance, if you're trying to lose fat, if you're trying to gain weight, if you're trying to, whatever you're trying to do, man, that is like the one thing you can do every single day that's going to give some insight into what's happening.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, me too. I think for a long while, I didn't really use a scale. I mean, I don't fluctuate that much, to be fair. So it's like, in the end, it's a few pounds, but I do like to step on every once in a while and just like get a checkpoint of like, do I still feel the way the number says? Yeah. Because that is what I'm always trying to kind of correlate, is that like, sometimes it's hard to tell what's happening because we are seeing gradual changes every day. And so I'm just sometimes want that reference point of like, oh yeah, I do feel 130 pounds right now.
Mhm.
Oh no, I do feel 125 pounds. Like you can tell there's
Right.
like a feeling, and sometimes you just want that benchmark of comparison. Like, oh, okay, yeah, this is actually how I feel. I
Yeah.
thought so, but I wanted to
But
make
right.
sure.
What's the deal?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, totally. Well, and again, it's just a tool, right? It's just like anything, you use it when it's useful and don't use it when it's not. I mean, another thing that is super helpful for understanding whether or not, like where you're at from a weight perspective, is pull-ups.
Yeah, totally.
Because then you're like,
Ooh.
these are a lot harder. And then you like go step on the scale and you're like, oh, I'm 10 pounds heavier. I'm like, okay,
Yep.
man, am I getting weak or am I getting fat? Like one of the two things is happening. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. No, it's so funny. So I want to talk about like how we actually are eating too, because you mentioned paleo. And so I'd love to just hear your thoughts on like actually how you eat and what you think
Right.
and just that whole
Where
thing.
that's all. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, let me first lay out like what I think, and then I'll talk about what I eat, because I think that'll probably make more sense. So I think paleo primal, like, basically two sides of the same coin. One includes dairy. Like it's still kind of how I think about those things. I'm sure that there are a multitude of variances now in all of those things that I'm not even aware of, because at some point you kind of just, okay, this is, you step away from it. Right.
Yeah. Right.
But the, I still think that paleo and primal, if you were going to just tell someone, here's what to do, buy this book and follow what it says, I still think those are the two go-tos, whether it's, it starts with food, whether it's, the paleo solution, if it's the primal blueprint version 7 or whatever, whatever the latest and greatest, those are still the things that, I think make the biggest difference. It's like the most, it covers the widest swath. You have the most likelihood of it working for the average person. And because I just still believe the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And in the end, it's just whole foods. Like they're really just focusing on eating whole foods.
And eschewing the ones that we know can be problematic for some percentage of people, right?
Yep, totally.
So I'm still a fan, for sure. But for me personally, what I've come to realize over the years is that there are aspects of the diet that I don't need to worry about that much, and I've left a lot more room for individuality in there. And, and it's interesting because some people there was a whole period of time, especially around the carbohydrate component of this, when paleo was paleo, but then all of a sudden low carb and keto started to crawl into the paleo primal sphere. And then all of a sudden it became that paleo and primal were super low carb, right? And in the beginning of it all, that wasn't the case. Like if you read the paleo solution, if you read the primal blueprint and you look at Sisson's carbohydrate curve and you look at all of that, it's like, it's a spectrum. It's been a spectrum from the beginning. Yeah. And I think that got lost for a little while, and to the detriment of a lot of people, and I mean, and I don't know. I don't really know that metabolic damage, broken metabolisms and adrenal fatigue and all of this stuff. Like I don't know, like there obviously stuff happens with people, but I don't think that being low carb for a period of time breaks someone beyond repair, right? Which is what some people would lead you to believe. Similar to a high carbohydrate diet immediately causing diabetes and cancer or whatever, right? I mean, it just doesn't work like that, So I think what's funny about it is I'm saying I started off paleo primal and now I've kind of come into my own thing. But the reality of it is it's like actually what paleo and primal was when we first started talking about it, which was, like you said, whole foods from the best sources and eschewing the things that don't work for you. Yep. Right. And it was, as Rob used to say, it is macronutrient agnostic, right? It's like, this is all about the quality of food. I don't care if you're eating 40% protein, 20% protein, 10% carbohydrate, whatever. Find the thing that works for you. It's all about the quality of the food.
Right.
And that is squarely where I am now.
Yep.
I think that similar to the scale, I think there was a period of time where, I was a little more, don't need to weigh yourself, don't need to worry about calories, just eat these foods and everything will work out. And for some subset of people, that still is true. Don't worry about any of the rest of that stuff. Just eat, paleo or primal whole foods, and your body's going to naturally sort it out. Some subset of people, that's true. For me personally, and for the majority of people that we work with, because for the people who can just read the book and follow it and then don't have any problems, they're not usually looking for coaching, right? So we end up with folks who that doesn't work for, which it's funny. It goes all the way back to the beginning of Be the Wellness. You've gone paleo, now what? Right? Was like our tagline.
Yeah.
And so how do you continue to iterate on this so that you continue to improve? And so I think for me, it's still about paleo primal from a food quality perspective. The macronutrient and calorie component, I pay a lot more attention to now, especially if there's an athletic or body composition goal in mind. And I think I plant firmly in, especially from any of it. If you're trying to lose fat, maintain body weight, or put on muscle, calories are king. It's quantity and quality are absolutely paramount. But when it comes to putting on weight or losing weight, the calories are more important. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just the bottom line. So calorie count, protein intake, and the rest is completely up to your lifestyle, like what works best for you, because the reality is we know that some people have emotional triggers around carbohydrates or crunchy, salty things. And some people have emotional triggers around fatty foods, right? And so if you know that you can't just eat one chip, then maybe, you want to stay a little bit more on the low carbohydrate side. If you know that you just smash the bacon when given the opportunity, then maybe you're not a free feed fat person.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's where the individuality comes in. But for me, again, it's back to the whole food component, pretty much primal, because I eat a lot of dairy at this point. And it's all about the calories and the protein intake and letting everything else fall with what feels best and supports your athletic endeavors.
Yeah, I would just add the one thing to the idea of calories being king is just when you are trying to lose weight, there is a very important component, I would say, in the kind of calories you're getting, just for the mere fact that if you're trying to cut calories and say you decide, well, I want to eat, a chocolate chip cookie every day, and that's going to be 300 calories.
Right.
You're going to be missing some 300 calories worth of micronutrients, of roughage, perhaps that would come from maybe, a healthier food source.
Yeah.
And so it's going to affect potentially your weight loss efforts because of the way you're going to feel about maintaining that caloric deficit.
100%.
And so that's the only thing I would add to it is that calories are king, but don't get that confused with that means if you really just only want to eat, 1,000 calories of crap, that's fine.
Right.
It's going to influence the way that your body responds to the weight loss process in myriad ways, but that is definitely one of them. And so I just want to just go one level deeper on that.
100%.
I could see people hearing that and going, well, okay, well.
Sweet. If it fits your macros.
If it really doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because I 100% disagree with the entire philosophy of if it fits your macros. I mean, you can look on Instagram, and if you're not familiar with what that is, it's basically doesn't matter what the food is, as long as you're getting X protein, X carbohydrate, X fat, that equals X, calories. Donuts, beer, and, popcorn versus a steak, some broccoli, and Brussels sprouts, right? I mean, those are very, very, very different from a nutrient density perspective. And you're 100% correct. I mean, you're really going to be selling yourself short on the long term, and not even that long of term. Like 3 months down the road of eating nutrient poor foods, the diet that you're on is going to become a lot harder to stick to, because the bottom line is that the body, and we're learning more and more about this all the time, that the body craves the nutrients that it needs. I mean, even down to specific amino acids in the protein, your body's going to veer towards the kinds of foods that have the amino acids that your body is lacking. I mean, these are very intelligent meat vehicles that we're running around in. So if you're filling yourself up on ice cream and cookies, you're missing a ton of micronutrients, and your body is going to crave those. And so, it's going to, as the cravings increase, the calorie deficit becomes even harder to maintain. And so the number one best way to do it is an incredibly nutrient dense caloric deficit.
And I think another thing that would be interesting to share is just that one of the things I think we've both changed on is we are highly, highly focused on quality foods. Like that is 100% of what we're focused on when we're eating at home, when we're creating our life, the way we're looking at even restaurants to eat at. But, when something comes up, we just really don't trip anymore on like eating it. Like there really isn't something that we say, oh, that's bad or that's not good or you shouldn't have that. Like we have definitely come to a place where it's like we 100% are cool with anything that we want to eat. Like if we want to eat it, we're going to eat it. We're going to eat it with like a feeling of excitement of, I really want to have this right now and I'm going to enjoy it and I'm going to have the experience of whatever it is because I'm powerfully making the decision that this is what I want to do right now. And I don't have to drag in a bunch of fear tactics to it. I don't have to drag in a bunch of dogma. I can actually just be confident in the decision I'm making about having that thing in that moment. And then it's just really back to like life as usual, you know, like that's, and I think that's one thing that, especially coming from the Rob Wolf camp where we were beat down a lot about, even entertaining the idea of having certain foods. And I just think that like, we have let go of that shame. We've let go of like that whole thing. It's like, it's just a choice that you're making right now. And you either have it or you don't have it. And then you get back to business as usual.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Poor Rob.
No, I love Rob.
The thing I think about with this sometimes is like, so if we hadn't had that period of being really strict, would we have seen enough benefit to really truly understand how useful that strategy is?
I actually would say probably not. And the reason that I would say that is because my allergies went away, my skin cleared up. The things that like were physical, like health issues actually cleared up. And I actually got to experience what it means to tighten the reins and to take control of my health through the paradigm of food. And so I agree with you. Like if you haven't had that experience and you're still suffering with any kind of ailments, like it would be worth going that strict route.
Yeah, finding it. Yeah, finding your
finding
spot.
that level. Yeah, because even now, if we have something a few too many days in a row, we're both like, you know what, starting to feel it. It's not that good. Let's just clean it up and get back to neutral. And then like whatever it is that you're feeling, say you're just feeling puffy or like, I feel a little lethargic, or it's just like, I'm not optimized. It's time to clean it up. Like just get back to it.
Yeah. This is the deal the other day. Your eyes were puffy in the morning. It was like cats and pizza.
Yeah, we had gluten-free pizza. You're like, are you sleepy? And I'm like, I think it's just cat and pizza eyes because my mom has a cat and I'm slightly allergic to cats. So yeah.
Yeah, that's the deal. So we should probably move on to mind, but I want to tap one thing on exercise because I don't think that I was even remotely articulated during my black and white saga earlier. So the thing that I think about strength conditioning that I've really changed my kind of viewpoint on is that consistency in the basic lifts is absolutely imperative. And I think that there's a tendency to to shoot for, well, there's a tendency for coaches to do things that are more complicated than they need to, because one, it's interesting to program, and two, clients tend to want something new. They get bored and want to be entertained by the exercise.
Right.
And that's kind of a double whammy, right? Because now all of a sudden you're as a coach, maybe you're pushing beyond the envelope of what you're really, have the knowledge base or capability of programming well and coaching, especially remotely. And then for the client, they're pushing beyond their physical ability, maybe into things that, can you do single leg contralateral, dumbbell banded deadlifts? Like, yeah, but what are the odds of getting hurt? You know what I mean? Like, the odds of injury go up so much when you complicate things, and the odds of just maybe not actually doing it well enough to get the desired effect, right? And so we tend to do these things because, hell, we've been deadlifting for the last freaking 16 weeks. I'm tired of deadlifting. You're like, well, you still need to deadlift. You know what I mean? You still need to pull. You still need to get this stuff done. And so I think that I've really focused on simplifying as much as possible, like taking things and ratcheting them way, way back. Like the things that I used to be able to program when I was training people in person are things of the past. When you're coaching remotely, or if you're a client and you're working with the remote coach, just recognize that simplicity is your friend. That's what's going to keep you safe. It's what's easy to progress and track and all of that kind of stuff. And so if you're finding yourself being bored doing the same thing for 4 weeks in a row, find something else to entertain you, because your exercise is designed to progress you and make you stronger and better. It's not there to entertain you, And so that's what I would throw out there. Are you not entertained?
It's interesting. I think the other thing that would be really, really beneficial for people is that even though Adam's talking about basic lifts, there are so many basic iterations of basic lifts, so it's like, even if you're deadlifting, there's so many different types of deadlifts that if you can just familiarize yourself, and people who've been in our programs know that, like, someday it's a single leg deadlift, or
right.
someday it's a kettlebell deadlift, or like there's enough variations that, like, if you are actually bored with the barbell deadlift or the whatever deadlift, like, learn the iterations, learn to iterate on things so that you can change it up enough that maybe if you just really are like, I can't deadlift another barbell today or I'm going to freak out, like, you have somewhere to go.
Right.
But you're not, it doesn't mean that you're like, forget it, I'm going to, take up ballet instead.
Yeah. Well, that would be fine, or just not do it. Right. Because I think that's what ends up happening. Like, I think it's seldom that people outright say, I'm bored with this workout, so I'm not going to do it. But what ends up happening is other things incrementally take priority, and you lose that, like, drive to train.
Yep. Sure. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
So
mind.
Yeah. Mind, which actually this really ties into it, because I'll just kind of tee this thing into the addiction to chaos, because what happens is when things are simple, we realize that actually we have an addiction to chaos, and we want it to be more complicated. We want it to be harder. We want it to be a struggle. We want it to be something. And I think that this ties in beautifully to one of the things that I've learned and really have experienced over the last 200 episodes, and also just in the coaching, is that many of us are addicted to chaos, and we don't realize that because we're so used to it that we say, I'm so busy and I'm so this and I'm so that. But as soon as any space frees up, as soon as anything becomes easier, we fill it right back up with more chaos. And that's exactly what you're talking about with the weightlifting. Like, I've been doing this too long, I'm quote unquote bored. let me make it harder again. And I understand we like to be challenged. Our brains like to be stimulated, and that's fine. But I would just invite people to look at where they want to make things complicated that don't need to be complicated, and where they can actually free up some of that RAM for the things that really do require more energy and more assimilation for, for your brain, more RAM. So to speak. And that is just the one thing that I have from, just zooming out is like really I think one of the most important things you can do is just look at how are you addicted to that chaotic energy in your life?
Yeah. Yeah. And man, it's it's so true. And it's such like a tempting trap because it's so easy to justify, and like the ways that I tend to do it are in research, right? I need to know more about this. I need to know more about this thing before I execute on it. I need to know more, and it's like, God, once you point out like the little things that you do, or when someone else points them out for you, it's so embarrassing that you can't get out of that damn loop, and it's a real, that chaos is a real thing. But I do think that there's simple ways to start to tease that out. Right. And I think if there's one thing that I've really grasped on the mind front, God, there's so many things. Since, Jesus, what was it, 200 episodes ago? Like I'm trying to think, like we recorded the very first episode of this podcast in our bedroom in our old house in Chico. Like on the golf course house.
Yeah.
I don't even know, like, what were we even doing there? Did we live there? We must have.
I think so.
Jesus, it was so long ago. It's crazy. There's been a lot of back and forths, and so I think about like the mindset that I had then compared to what I have now. And obviously, some of it's just from personal development, but some of it comes from this as well, right? Like just being tapped into and having your voice recorded weekly, with your thoughts on things, right? And it's changed a lot, it's changed a lot. And I think similar, to the nutrition and strength and conditioning stuff, I'm less rigid in some ways. And I think, I think a lot of that comes from just seeing that you just don't know, it's like, and I don't know. I mean, we talk to a lot of people on this podcast who will explain this to you, like we've heard it from a gazillion different guests, right? That like you don't know what you don't know. And that as you're progressing and moving along, your reference of time changes because you've been alive longer, and like you're like there's fewer actual memories. So like that all seems to be super short. But then you have this whole thing of, things that you thought were going to work or not work, turning out the exact opposite, right? And you just see it. And as you start to be more mindful, like mindfulness and mindful, like the word gets used so much, but like if you really start to pay attention to how often you're wrong about stuff, it eventually starts to really sink in. And I think that is something that, on the mind front, especially, has been a big pivotal change for me with this podcast, because it's one thing for you to tell me, you need to read this and blah, blah, blah. You're not thinking about this stuff right. I'm like, it's another thing to hear it from expert after expert after expert of these different ways, that we know that people help people open their mind a little bit and think about things differently and relieve some anxiety or to focus and be more productive, whatever the, thing is. When you see it happen enough times, it finally starts to crack in that you're like, man, you just don't know shit about any of this stuff, like you just don't. And, when, I remember it was maybe my second year as a captain, maybe my first year as a captain, I don't know, right in there, right after I promoted to captain, there was like this period of time that I remember, or that I realized that you don't know anything, and you're never going to. And probably most importantly, anyone whose opinion you should care about doesn't expect you to. You know what I mean? Like you're just you're, at least for me personally, I was holding myself to this ridiculous, unattainable standard, and assuming that because I held it in my position, that my bosses and the people around me also held that position. And I put a lot of undue stress on myself, and it was not until I kind of just opened my eyes a little bit more to what I was seeing around and watching people fail and what happened when they failed and nobody cared. Like, it happened, I think, now that I'm thinking about this, like, it happened, it was definitely my first year as a captain, because it was the first time that I'd supervised supervisors. You know what I mean? So now I had LTs working for me, and I was helping them learn how to supervise. And so they would make mistakes, and I'd look at the way that I was looking at them for making the mistake. And I wasn't like, oh, you're such an idiot, you should have known. How could you not know that? I was like, well, yeah, of course. You've just never seen that before.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute. is that how everybody around me has been behaving when I screw something up? And they're all like, oh, that's fine. Just, learn from it and move on, and internally I'm like, I'm the worst, It's like, how could you possibly have gotten to this position without knowing that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and you're just like, what the fuck, dude? Why are you so hard on yourself? So I don't really remember where I was going with that. But I think at the end of the day, it's like just this, there's a lot of room to grow, and you're never going to really ever get to the end of it.
Yeah.
And so giving yourself a break, and I don't mean, you don't get caught slipping, you know what I mean? But give yourself a break and give yourself some time to assimilate all of the new information that's around you, and just keep doing the work.
Yeah.
Just keep chipping away at it. And eventually that big old rock is going to be a David.
A what?
A David.
Oh, a
right?
David?
Yeah. Right?
I don't know what a David is.
The statue.
Oh,
chipping away at a rock.
Oh, okay. Like, sorry.
We
Your big punchline. I was like, a David. Like my dad?
Yeah.
A David. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
A David statue.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But they don't call it the David statue.
I don't know. Sorry, I missed the whole thing, but
right.
I get it.
That's right. I'm glad you clarified it, because probably other people missed it.
Yeah, I think that you're right. That compassion is king, right? Like, in the end, it's all about just finding that compassion for yourself and kind of finding that compassion for others, because we're all just in this journey of doing our best and taking the best next step that we know to take. And I think that, just to, keep saying it over and over, we just, like, the more we know, the less we know, in a way, and you're just like, all right, it gives you it gives you more lightness of being, because you realize that, like, all it really is this moment anyway.
Yeah.
And so, like, you have a choice about what you insert into the moment. And that is, in the end, like, really all that is to be negotiated at any given time is, like, what am I inserting into this moment? And that's where I would just encourage people to look at that, because are you inserting chaos into the moment that doesn't need to be there? Like you're just talking about, like, you inserted that chaos into your moment when, like, there was no requirement for it, when like all that had to be there was the moment. There was no other additional energy. There was no other additional, like, chaos that needed to be present to make that moment more valuable.
Right.
And like, I think, if anything, like, allowing yourself to have the moment without infusing it with all of that stuff is really powerful. Like, if you could just distill that, out of this, that's all we have is every moment, and then the next moment, and what are we making the choice to put into that moment?
Yeah.
And
well, and to what to take out of it, right? Like, because what you're bringing to the moment, maybe you could clarify. So when you're saying what you put into the moment, do you mean what you make that moment mean about you?
Yeah, what you make that moment mean. Yeah. And
yeah.
it's like, which is really cool, because in the end, what you realize is that you can put whatever filter on you want.
Right.
So if you're like, I'm going to make this moment mean awesome.
Yeah.
And this right now, we're in the perfect time for that, because with coronavirus and everything that's going on, we are seeing everybody's filters, like, in full tilt, and, like, whatever you want to make it mean, you are having the ability to put that filter on and turn it up and make this experience mean that thing.
Yeah.
And so it's like you can see some people who are making it mean this is amazing time with my family that I have a friend that I was just talking to, and she was like, I always wanted this experience of having my kids at home. She has one daughter off to college, and she's like, I feel like I got a redo to have my kids home and like really spend good time with them and everyone's getting along. It's like she made it mean that because that's the filter she created for that moment. Other people are making it mean like this is the end of the world and that nothing's going to work.
Our president wants us to eat Clorox.
Yeah. And it's just like, really, that's all it comes down to is like this moment and what you want to make it mean.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really true.
Yeah. And it's like, when you get that, it's actually amazing because then you realize all it is a choice. And, and then you just have to look at where your choice is coming from. What are they being informed by? And if they're being informed by trauma or old stories or, painful memories or things that haven't been cleared, then guess what? You can make a choice in the next moment to start working on clearing those things.
Yeah.
You can just make a choice to like get down to clearing that chaos out of there and clearing that trauma out of there. And, we all have trauma. We all have stored trauma. And, this is kind of like trauma is the one that sits sort of in between body and mind because like it does actually live in our physicality, but we can clear it. We can do things to clear it out and so that it doesn't keep projecting into our futures and we don't keep recycling it in our systems.
Yeah.
And this is the cool thing about it all is that like all it is just a choice to say, okay, so I notice that I keep infusing this chaos or this story or this thing in the moment. Do I want to keep this experience or toss it? Like, am I ready to create it differently? And like, if so, who can help me with those tools? Or maybe I have those tools that I'm just not using them. But like, that's all it is. It's so simple.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really true. We are creatures of habit for shizzle. Yes. And it's like that subconscious mind just keeps on rolling, repeating the same old thing,
Yes.
I think another thing that's interesting to think about with the mind stuff is really that, there's, like you're saying, it's up to us. We have our opportunity sort of in each moment to make things as awesome or not awesome as they are, right? I mean, and obviously terrible things happen, but how you react to it is really up to you, and to some degree your conditioning over the years, is gonna lead to that. But you can choose to do and be and think kind of whatever you want, right? And that's the one thing that we sort of still have a firm grasp on our freedom with is like a freedom of thought. I think anyway, some people would lead you to believe that you don't, but I think that we really do. And when it comes to, nailing things down with our mental processes, our ability to hang with and cope with the world and just be able to continue to derive meaning isn't really the word that I'm looking for. Not really purpose either, but like, it's almost like a mission. You know what I mean? And it's like, you could say that you need a purpose and meaning and a mission are all kind of the same. But, I look at a mission like more like your daily things, like what gets you up and gets you through your morning process and all of that kind of stuff. It's like it's the more micro of the larger purpose in life. Right. And so we get to choose what that is. And I think that if there's one thing that has really become clear to me, so actually coming up on an episode with Dr. Erin, where she talked about 3 ways of being. And I'm not going to spoil the whole thing because she talks about it a lot better than I do. But what really made a lot of sense to me is that one of the 3 ways of being is that you are the everything. Mm-hmm. I'm rooted in the me or something like that, which actually is kind of funny because I think that was a line from Grosse Point Blank. You remember when he was talking to his therapist? Anyway,
I don't think I know that movie well enough. Yeah.
Anyway, all right. He had him say this mantra that I'm rooted in the me that is now and this whole thing, but it was actually fairly similar to that. But basically, her take on it is that, you can choose to give away bits and pieces of who you are, and give those to some other power to help you make decisions. And it's all fine, right? And she does a great job of explaining it. Like, there's nothing wrong with any of that. But one of the ways of being is to not give any of it away and to fully recognize that you are the creator of every single moment that you live. And of course, we are subject to circumstances around us, and there's things like that happen. But what happens inside of you is yours.
Is your domain.
Unless you give it away, right? It is 100% yours. And I just think that grasping that has been, it's been a slow and kind of undulating process, but over the last couple of years, that's really something that has solidified for me, and it's something that I've had a hard time understanding religion and a lot of different sort of metaphysical thought processes and all of this stuff, because it's always felt like there was no reason to give away something. Like, why are you relying on this story to like make you who you are? But I could never really put it together, And she really put a button on it. And it's just this idea that you're it. All of this is coming from you. And there's something incredibly powerful about that. And there's also something incredibly daunting about that, which is that you are responsible for all of your shit forever, forward and backward. It's all on you, and in one case you're like, damn it, but in the other case you're like, oh, thank God. There's no magic trick. There's no combination of buttons to push in the universe to make this shit work. It's just you. Just do it,
Yeah, which ties in perfectly to kind of the last thing I want to say about the mind piece of this is that if there's anything I've learned over the last, especially 4 years of coaching authentic self, and really being in that world, is a bit about forgiveness. And we work on forgiveness a lot in my programs and just in general, because I think it's one of the most powerful things to do exactly what you're talking about, which is gain your power back, take your energy back. And it is actually one of the one of the reasons that it's most difficult for people to forgive is that they're terrified of owning their entire story and and being completely responsible for themselves. Right. And we talk a little bit about this with Dr. Karen Shanks in a couple of episodes as well. So whenever she comes out, and the same exact thing is that people are terrified of actually taking that power back. We find a lot of comfort actually in giving some of that power away and saying, well, I'm this way because this thing happened to me, or I can't really control this event. Something terrible happened to me. And, you think about it deep down inside, whenever something is wrong in your life, you go, oh, it's because that bad thing happened to me when I was a kid, or this thing, it's still influencing me. It's still grabbing me. It's still creating my reality. And in the end, if you can actually forgive, if you can actually heal, then you have to be 100% responsible for your reality.
Yeah.
And that is one of, like you said, the scariest things that people come up against, and one of the most beautiful things they come up against as well.
Yeah. Yeah. There's Alan Watts basically gave a talk describing this whole thing. Like, yeah, if you ever listen to Alan Watts, I mean, he's British, right? So he's got that going for him, but he's just an incredible speaker and like an interesting thinker, right? And so some of his lectures are amazing. And he has one that pretty much nails all of this. I'll see if I can find it and link it below because it's entertaining.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think we should just tie this whole mind section up with one thing. And that is, in the end, at the end of the day, all there really is love. If you can get back to the vibration of love, if you can just turn yourself back to that energy of love, it really is the ultimate tool, the ultimate weapon, the ultimate thing that creates opportunity and healing and all of the things that are getting in the way. If you can it's the ultimate neutralizer, if you will. And so when you're struggling with something or you're up against something, just remember, like, what does it feel like to be in the vibration of love?
Mm-hmm.
And then activate from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely don't activate from the feeling of frustration.
Don't
That's not
activate.
the place. That is not the place to create.
Don't create from there.
Okay. Experience.
Awesome. Experiences. Yeah.
We've had a lot of them
We have.
since this whole party started.
Yep.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about this piece of the business and this piece of our story right now, particularly with everything that's going on in the world with travel literally halted,
Yeah.
including ours. And I was thinking about it earlier. I was taking some notes about experience, and I was just thinking about, what are some of the things that we can sort of distill out of what experience means. And the thing that came to me is just that peak experiences are really food for the soul.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're like nutrients for the soul. When you get to experience these peak experiences around the world and just do things that are incredible, I don't know, experiences really, again, like it's food for your soul. Your soul just like feels like it got the best meal of its life.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it fits, right? So if you kind of ascribe to this idea that we're here, if we're celestial beings having a physical experience, is that how they say it?
Yeah.
Is it celestial?
Well, I think they say celestial, or
They
I
also
think they say
say
spiritual beings having
whatever.
this physical
Something or other.
experience.
Yeah. So if we're
either or.
ethereal,
Yeah.
normally,
Yeah.
and we're here to have this experience, then there should be some reward pathway that would intrigue you to have more of them, right?
Mhm.
And that sure seems to be true.
Yeah.
It's because there just is nothing like it, and it's not that every one of these peak experiences is rafting Kaituna Falls, right?
Yeah.
It's not. It's the moments of human connection,
Yeah.
sitting around sharing a meal, riding a bus, like whatever. It's those are those moments, and
Yes.
it's like, it's one of the things that is incredibly challenging to articulate. Like when you're writing sales copy for a web page that's trying to sell a retreat, you're like, but how do we say, it's this? You're like, you just can't explain it. It's
true.
just there, but what it is. If you've had one of those experiences where just everything slows down, you're just met with just like this incredible sense of calm, and like everything is right.
Yeah. And presence.
Yeah. You're just there and everything's perfect. Like that's the thing. Right.
Yes.
And I mean, there's a formula for those that I think we've gotten pretty close to cracking. We're like setting it up, right.
Yeah.
To make it happen. But it's individual for everyone. Everybody has it at different times, and it's something that we talk about at the beginning of our retreats. We give our little spiels about kind of what to expect. And we typically talk about that moment in the retreat when the switch flips and the group is now a unit. It's like with everything gels and the experiences like are felt across the whole thing.
Right.
Somebody on the other side of the room smiles and you feel it. I'm like, that happens every single time. It's just a matter of when.
Yep.
And it's cool.
Yeah,
there's something to it.
It's been a beautiful experience to be in service to that, which is what we really have been in service to, is that experience, that nourishment of the soul with that interaction of like the elements of the world.
Yeah.
And it's been really beautiful to be in service to that. And I think that that's one of the things that just particularly right now with everything that's going on is kind of reflecting on what that whole experience component of our business and of Be the Wellness has been. And it's like, we've been in service to the nourishment of the soul, like in person.
Yeah.
And
real enrichment.
Enrichment. Yeah.
Life. Yeah.
Yeah. And, just thinking about everything that's going on, that's like part of me on one hand, I'm like, oh, well, it's just going to bounce back and we're going to go back to how it was and we're going to run our retreats and we're going to do our thing. And then the other side of me kind of quanders like, okay, are we, I don't think that's a word. It should be a word though.
That's a quandary and ponder.
I quandered. It should be a word though.
This is quite a pondery.
But I guess wonders would be the better word. But I wonder if things don't go back and somehow it does shift. And maybe we're not able to have as many of these peak experience or facilitate in a way that we have in the past. And it just brings me back to like knowing that no matter where we are, like we can create these peak experiences.
Right.
We can create these in everyday life. And, I was just making a post on Instagram about this, that like we can adventure in place. Every day is an awesome opportunity to have a unique interaction with the world around you. And that is what we've obviously wanted to facilitate for people in these bucket list experiences. But in the end, what we've wanted to instill in people is like to remind you of the magic
Right.
that is all around us all the time. And like to be on a trip, you're actually untethered enough to be present enough to really experience it. But if you can untether yourself in your everyday life, it's like, it's right there for you all the time.
Yeah. It's available. Yeah. I mean, and that is right. So like that is kind of part of the secret sauce, right? That makes this whole thing works is that you remove people far enough from their normal environment and you take away all their responsibility, right? So, I mean, you're truly just on the vacation,
yes,
the adventure. You're not having to worry about any of it. Right. And those two things allow for that freedom and that space to let new stuff in,
Yep.
And it is one of my kind of fears about all of this is that, because we will go back to traveling and we will go back to some semblance of normalcy. But what I really hope doesn't happen, and I don't, I'm not trying to like pray for this negatively or whatever. What is that? What do they say? Worry is praying
for what you don't want.
So I'm not worrying about it, but it's out there in the things that I'm trying to avoid, right? Is that people become worried when traveling, because there's I just know this, right? Because we travel with people who are worried about traveling. You know what I mean? And we typically just through the force of the group, alleviate that worry. But if everyone's ambient level of worry goes up when being out and about in the world and interacting with people who are strangers, if that elevates too much, it's really going to be a bummer. If we just kind of close off to some degree to the experiences that are available, and I'm not blaming anyone if that's what happens like internally, but I can just see how that would negatively impact our future. Not our future like with the business, but our future as people. Like if you think about like the carefree days of summer when you were in junior high, right? Before you knew the world was a scary place, right? And then you get a little bit older and, you get pantsed in high school or whatever happens to you, and you're like, oh man, people suck. And then you're like, you put up a wall, and my concern about this whole thing is that could just start to happen. We just start to put up these walls and we start to travel in our own little bubbles through places, but don't really experience them in the way that we like to,
Yeah, totally. I've been thinking about this a lot lately because, I think that one of the things that has really resonated with me through this whole thing is that the need for safety has grown so strong in us. And obviously as humans, we are always looking to stabilize and make things, that homeostasis is like such a deep part of our psyche and who we are as beings. But that I have, through this process, given myself permission to let go of safety on such a deeper level. Like, there is just no guarantees. There just really isn't. And I think if you can make peace with that, if you can really just settle into that and ask yourself, what am I afraid of? Like, in the end, what am I really? Usually it comes down to you're afraid of dying. Yeah. Why are you afraid of dying? Like every single one of us is headed there. So like, it's time for us to get comfortable with this concept. Like nobody's getting out of here alive. And so right now, everyone is terrified of dying. And I'm just personally, I want to honor and respect everybody's fears because that's beautiful and that's where they're at. And it's like, I totally get it. But on the flip side, you're like, listen, we've got to develop some resiliency around this topic because we have gotten soft
Super soft.
as a species.
Yeah.
Like death has been a part of our lives for a long, long time in a very present way. And it's become kind of this like back shelf thing that we're all ignoring.
Right. Pretending it's not going to happen.
Until something, happens and maybe we lose a loved one and then we're devastated and it's like we don't have the tools or the compass to navigate this event. And it really injures us at a deep, deep level. And many people are injured like very deeply on, from just the fear of that's going to happen to them or that's going to happen to someone they love. And like, it is going to happen.
Right.
Like it's going to happen to every single one of us. We've got to come to terms with this thing.
Yeah.
If we don't want to live in fear and then be like asking the world to make it safer for us to be here,
right.
Taking away liberties or doing whatever it is. We don't need to go into a big rabbit hole, but like it's not safe here.
Right. Yeah. And it's never going to be.
It's never going to be. And that's part of what makes it beautiful is that the unknown is like this day is so precious. This moment is so precious because we don't know that we have it forever. And like we've just got to come to terms with this whole dying thing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Can't nerf the world. And even if you did nerf the world, there's still lightning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And lightning will go right through Nerf. I'm sure of it. And so how much of your freedom do you give away in the false hope of safety?
And it just ties into the traveling thing. Like, do you just not travel anymore because you're afraid? Like, are you just not going to live? So you're afraid of dying, so you're not going to live. Like it just doesn't make sense, And so I just think that this is such an awesome opportunity for all of us as a collective to go, what am I so afraid of? And what do I need to get present with? Like, if I died tomorrow, what are the things that I haven't done? What are the things I haven't said? Who have I not become that I could look back on this lifetime and feel like, yeah, I did that. I did that well.
Mm-hmm.
I did that beautifully. I did that compassionately. Like, that is the most pressing thing, is not that we give up our freedoms in order to stave that off as long as possible. It's that we come to terms with it so that we can live fully and brilliantly in this moment without that fear mongering of that, scary ghost of death lingering over us.
Right. The old Reaper.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. One more plug for Ernest Becker. Denial of Death. Read the book. It'll change your game.
So we hope that you guys have enjoyed this podcast. We really have loved doing this podcast. And, it's been an interesting journey for us because it wasn't about getting 20 million listens or it wasn't about making a bunch of money. It was really a service of devotion to our community. Yeah. And it always has been. And, we've always just wanted to give a voice to the love and the connection and the commitment we have to our community. And it never mattered to us if it was one person or a million people listening, but that what we said was in integrity with what we believed and that it was in service to the people who were listening.
Right.
And so thank you for listening. And we hope that we have served you well in this 200 episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. All in the past tense, because from here forward, we're just shilling for, whatever supplement company. Sun Power Protein. Here we go. No, I mean, it's really true. And that was, you said it very, very well. I mean, that was really the genesis of this whole thing, was answering questions from our coaching programs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you can only answer so many of those. So it turns into something else. But yeah, I'm excited to see, what comes next. Like we said, we've got some cool stuff in the pipeline already, great interviews with cool people. Yes. Some really good ones coming up, actually.
Some really good ones. I think we've actually kind of doubled down on our commitment to the podcast and sort of started a new energy or a new infusion of energy into it. And we're really excited about the next 100 episodes. And we are actually more focused on getting it out to more listeners because we really do think that it's so important for unique voices to be heard in the wellness industry, and especially with everything that's going on right now, with so much stifling of voices and so much censorship and so many things that we're up against right now. Like, we think it's important that people have their voices and that their voices be heard. And so this next 100 episodes, we are committed to growing this and to spreading the good word. So if you guys have enjoyed this podcast, if you want to share it with someone, that would be the greatest gift that you could give us at this 200 episode point. That, of course, in a 5-star review. If you haven't reviewed yet, we would love, on this 200th episode to receive that blessing from you guys. And it really means a lot to us. Like, it really does. And, we can only say it so many times, and we know life is busy and all of you are up to a lot right now, but it does mean a lot when we get that feedback,
Yeah, for sure. All right. So let's recap this real quick.
Yeah.
Body.
You're resilient.
You're resilient. There's more than 2 ways to skin a cat. There's a lot of ways to get this thing done. And it's about finding the individuality, the piece of this that works for you, given some pretty broad parameters of progress.
Yes. Right? Consistency is king.
Consistency is king.
Yep.
Followed by calories and quality of food.
Yes.
Right there.
And be consistent with them.
Be consistent with
Mind.
Open it.
Open your mind. Yeah. Remember that all you have is this moment. And what do you want this moment to mean?
Yeah. And you're never too old to learn new tricks. You might just not care enough, which is fine. You could if you wanted to. And that's an important distinction.
Yes. Remember, you are the master creator of your reality. And so if your life isn't what you want it to be, then work on the things that are keeping it in an energy space that is not in alignment with what you want it to look like.
Right. And it's probably the fear of your own death.
And it's probably the fear of your own death. So it's cool. You're going to die. It's going to be fine.
Peak experiences are amazing, and they are attainable in any moment. If you have the eyes and ears and heart for it.
And the people that we've met in our lives who have been the most joyous, beautiful, happy people are the people who have lived closest to nature and in service to it.
Yeah, it's true. Bam.
200
in the books.
200 in the books. We love you guys.
On the books.
Means a lot to us that you're a part of our community, and we wish you nothing but the most beautiful experience of life that is possible. And it is possible.
Yeah.
So step into it, babes. You got it.
There's nothing to do but take the first step.
Yes.
Yep. All right.
We love you.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.